Howdy, friends. Had an interesting thing here that I figured out this evening. Figured I'd share it, see if it could help anybody else. So, if you're familiar with GraphQL, you know that it's made up of a kind of uh, not static, but a defined schema. And on that defined schema, something that with a lot of GraphQL libraries allows you to do is cache at the field level. So with REST, we can cache a response, and if it matches the response hash, you can return the same response again. But there isn't an ability with like a REST API call to cache just certain fields. But we can do that with GraphQL. So if we see in our contrived example here, we have our to-do object. And in this to-do object, we have a few fields. And then on the text field, you can see I have a cache control directive. So why we would do this is, let's say maybe the to-do object for the most part changes pretty often, or it's a relatively fast query, so we don't have to really worry about caching it. But for whatever reason, the text field takes a really long time to gather the data. So we're going to assume in this contrived example that that's what the case is. The text field is a really expensive query, and so we need to figure out a way to speed that up. So a problem that I have discovered, and maybe I just haven't looked on Google hard enough, but it seems that with the GqlGen GraphQlGen, which is the most popular GraphQL server library for the Go programming language, doesn't seem like it has any support, and there doesn't seem to be any plugins for a field level cache control. So I went ahead and just built one real quick because it's a relatively simple thing. And as far as I can tell, there's no plugins out there. So if you know one, send it to me. It'd be better than maintaining my own package here. But so to use this, relatively simple, and I'll send the link out along with this post so everyone can, and you can try it as well. But we go ahead in our schema file and make a cache control directive that has a max age, and that's milliseconds, max age milliseconds int. And then any field that we want to apply that cache control to, we can apply the directive with a max age value. So again, in our contrived example, our text, for whatever reason, takes really long to query, so we want to try to cache that pretty aggressively. And to make this a little less of a contrived example, on my text resolver that's going to resolve that text field, I went ahead and actually I'm going to go ahead and bump this up so that it's even worse for the demo. It sleeps 2 seconds before it returns the text. So we can see how painful that could be in a production environment if this is a really slow piece, but the rest of our object returns quickly. So we'd only want to cache certain items. So to use this library, very simple. This is standard GraphQLGen boilerplate. If you're not familiar with the Go GraphQLGen, I would recommend read their docs first, and then adding this on is very trivial. So the first thing we do is load our library in, call the new field cache function. We can set a cap, which is just the maximum capacity. If you have a lot of RAM on your pod or wherever you're running this container, you can set this pretty high, because unless your objects are just giant. And then you have a TTL, which is time to live. For this contrived example, I have a TTL of 5 seconds, but in production would probably set it quite a bit longer. That's just when do we completely evict any objects from the cache. So we have that there. We're going to capture our standard GraphQLGen config object into a variable. Again, this is just standard Go GraphQLGen. If you're not familiar with it, I would recommend reading that first, but this is just very standard stuff, capturing that into the C variable. And then after we run the GraphQLGen and it picks up all of our changes, including our directive, we will have access to the C, which is the config.directives.cache control, which is our named directive. So the cache object that we created from my plugin has a handler function, and all you have to do is attach that handler function to that directive, and you are good to go. Anytime a resolver is called, it runs it through this handler function. If there is a cache control directive on that field, it will go ahead and cache it for you. It has time to live. It has all that good stuff built in. One quick caveat is, I think it really only works on field resolvers. And again, if you're not familiar with GraphQL, that'd be a good thing to look up before you try to use this. But you can imagine most of the object is delivered here, so we can't really cache parts of it and not parts of it because it's all kind of delivered at the same time. But because this is, you'd imagine in a real world, this could be in a separate database, this could be in a Redis cache or something, but this data lives elsewhere. And this is what we are going to pull separately. Takes a long time to pull, and we're going to go ahead and cache it as effectively a response cache. So what this looks like in use is if we go to our playground, you can see in the corner here, I have just a very simple query. We've got our ID, and I can actually go ahead and put done in there as well. And then our text is our long running query. So if I run this, you're going to notice that it takes quite a bit of time to get the query data back. Right, so that was 2 seconds, so that was pretty bad. But if I do it again, you see it's instantaneous, right? Because that long running query, and then you can see there it hit that time to live. So I can go, hit the time to live again, and that now pulled fresh data in, and we can then do our really quick queries again. So very simple plugin. I'm sure there's other things that need to be added to it if this was going to be, an official open source plugin that other people were going to use, but the code is available. You can see it's a relatively simple system, just kind of patching in to the existing GraphQLGen ecosystem, if you will. So hope that's helpful. Hope you learned something, and we'll talk to you later.